Sup guys, welcome to another episode of Pointless Minmaxing. This time I'll be covering a topic that matters almost as little as anti-air, which is submarines. I did a lot of testing, but the spreadsheet that I recorded all my results in is a little bit messy. So I'm going to start with my findings and then go over the data after, to not waste your time if you don't really care about all the nitty-gritty details. So the first thing that I noticed is that most bosses have a bias towards one side of the screen. This could be the top or the bottom. Suppose the boss likes to hang around the bottom of the screen, then the middle and the bottom subs will have no issue hitting it, while the top sub might go in and out of range. I'll be referring to this as good or bad positions, where good means that the subs are mostly in range, and bad means that the subs might not be able to find their target a lot of the time. I'll start off by talking about the individual submarines. First up is Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci has the highest damage, not accounting for hunter mods, which means bonus damage against the specific type of enemy. And she doesn't need to be buffed in any way. Although she has some flooding from her mines, most of her damage comes from raw torpedo damage, so she wants a good position in order to deal the most amount of damage. Next is U-81. Her performance has always been hard to gauge because flooding doesn't show up on the end screen, but I managed to calculate her flooding damage pretty accurately and it makes her the highest damage dealer with other Wolfpack subs. If fighting a carrier enemy, she's the strongest even without the flooding. Since a lot of her damage comes from flooding, she doesn't mind being in a bad position because she can still apply her flood. Next up is U-96, who has lower self-damage but good buffs for Wolfpack. Since she's used for her buff, she can go in a bad position and still contribute, but there are some weird things about her which I'll go into later. Next up is U-37, who is the second best Wolfpack damage dealer after U-81. She's mostly a downgrade to Leonardo da Vinci even in a full Wolfpack fleet, but she's the best ship to use in a good position out of all the Wolfpack subs because all of her damage is just raw torpedo damage. Next is U-47. While she has high damage potential, she is very inconsistent because she has to chain many torps together to keep her debuff applied, meaning she needs to be in a good position. She's almost always weaker than U-37 though if the enemy moves. Finally, there's Archerfish. She doesn't seem particularly stronger than U-37 or 47 and wants a good position, and she is also dragged down further by needing to be sortied with another USS sub. She could be worth using though against heavy armor enemies due to her hunter mod. As for the other submarines that I didn't mention, I didn't really feel it necessary to test them because I didn't see any reason to use them over the ones I mentioned. There are some niche ones like I-13 and Royal Fortune though, but their impact is not directly comparable to the traditional damage dealing subs. Next up, I'll be talking about the best fleet compositions. First is U-37, U-81, and Da Vinci, with U-81 in the bad position and the other two in good positions. They just deal the most damage. Next is U-37, U-96, and U-81. From my testing, U-96 didn't contribute as much as you would expect her to, looking at her on paper, and definitely doesn't make up for the extra raw damage that Da Vinci brings. However, since U-81 and U-96 both don't mind being in bad positions, it could be the best fleet if the boss likes to hug the edge of the screen, making both the top and the bottom positions bad positions. Next is U-37, U-81, and U-47. This is pretty much worse than the other Wolfpack, but could be good if the boss doesn't move much. And in last place we have Archerfish, and then Cavallo or Albacore, and Leonardo da Vinci. This is worse than the above options, but not by much. USS subs have much better survivability, so they're better suited for Chapter 14 mobs where you need to call them multiple times and they can actually die. And now we get into the testing stuff. Okay, and here we are. My testing was done during the Albion raid event because those kinds of events are the only ones that are infinitely repeatable and you can call subs every time. It also helps that the subs didn't die to Albion when they surfaced, so the tests were more consistent. The two important pieces of information that I recorded was the end screen damage of the submarines and the total damage taken by Albion. Both of these numbers don't account for AA. My surface fleet was the same one that I used to try to figure out how AA damage is calculated, which is over here. So I had anchorage with no guns or torps and then 2 repair ships at the back. To isolate the damage dealt by the surface fleet, so I first took this average over here, 9.2k, since it was the same fleet. And then I also took the total damage here, and then sub-fleets that don't have any damage over time, so I could just total these 3 numbers. Or no, these 3 numbers. And then I would be able to get the surface damage here. So this is the average across all of the subfleets that don't have damage over time. So I took all of this, all of this, all of these. And then over here is the culmination of all the samples. So I took this, which is all of this minus this. And then I took this, which is all of this minus this, and so on. So all of the subfleets that didn't do damage over time, I would take them as a sample, and then also this. So I had like, I think there's like about 60 or 70 samples here. Let me see. Yeah, should be about, 120? Maybe even 120 samples. Yeah, I'm wrong. Oh yeah, because there's more here. Okay. And then finally, to calculate the flood damage, I took the total damage, and then I subtracted the end screen damage from the subs, as well as the average surface damage, which I showed just now. And then everything left over should be the flood damage, which doesn't show up on the end screen, but shows up on the total damage screen. If that makes sense. Okay, finally we can get into the results of each fleet. So first I did 10 runs with a bunch of different fleets here to see which ones would be worth testing further. All the subs use plus 13 bitters, and then hull and snorkel, except for U-37, Da Vinci, and also Archerfish, because they don't need it. So I just replaced the snorkel with the Oxytorp. So the first one I tested was U-37, U-96, and U-47. None of them have damage over time, and I wanted to start by testing how the positions affect damage. And this is where I noticed that the boss tends to hug the bottom side of the screen. So as you can see, U-96, who was in the top position, did significantly less damage. And then from this I remember that most bosses, including like Guild and Opsai, usually hug one side of the screen as well, which is why you'll see one of your subs always do like really low damage, and you can't really tell why. And then next I switched U-47 and U-37, so I put 47 in flag, 37 bottom. And it seems that the damage fell by quite a bit, so from here to here, and both of them did less damage, so this is where I concluded that U-37 probably prefers to be in the middle, and then U-47 prefers to be in the bottom. And this could be because of the ship's timing, based on their reloads and then where the boss is at the time that they fire. This fleet actually overperformed in these first 10 trials though, so we'll get more into that later. And then next I tried U-96 in the middle, and as expected, she deals much less than the other two. Also, since I have data for U-96 as top, as well as U-96 as middle, and then I also have U-47 as top, and U-47 as middle, I can take, for example, this divided by this, and then this divided by this. Both cases, they seem to turn out to be about 63 to 64%. So the top position probably has like a 63 to 64% hit rate in this specific battle. And then next, I replaced U-47 with U-81. And obviously she's going to do more because it's a carrier and she has a hunter mod. So I divided her damage by 1.2 to remove the hunter mod. And I also calculated her flood damage by taking, as you can see, I take the total damage, I subtract the sum of these, or these three, yeah, and then I also subtract, over here, the average surface damage, and that gives me the flood damage, which is 13k, so it's very significant, and even after you take away the hunter mod, if you add the flood damage, you can see that she deals the most, even more than U-37. And then after that, I tested Archerfish and Kovala with Da Vinci. And since Da Vinci is level 125, the only level 125 sub that I have, I multiplied her damage by 86 over 96 in order to adjust for the level advantage. Oops. And then Yeah, I also got the Flood in the same way. And I also took away Kavala's Hunter mod and multiplied both Kavala and Archerfish's damage by 1.06. It's not completely accurate, but just the estimation to make up for their lack of Oath. And you might think that, you know, the damage doesn't seem that far off, but it's actually Da Vinci doing most of the work, and the pair of Kavala and Archerfish is nowhere as good as, say, the pair of two of the Wolfpack subs. Okay, and then moving on. I tested G70E to see if they would be better, since Albion moves a lot, but even after multiplying the damage by 1.18 to make up for the lack of plus 13s, they still did less. So the timing is just not good enough. And then these last three is where I tested Da Vinci with the Wolfpack subs. And again, I adjusted for the level advantage. And what I notice here is that Da Vinci tends to prefer the bottom position, from what I can see. Yeah, the bottom she seemed to do more, so I just left her in the bottom for the further testing. And from the prelim testing, it seemed like this composition, U37, U81, and Da Vinci did the best. And I believe it was the U fleet without U81 that did the second best. But this is a little bit weird because nowhere else did U37 do 56k, so that's why I went into some further testing. Okay. And again, here's the first fleet. Da Vinci in the bottom, and then U37 and U81. After 50 runs, it averaged out to be about 134k, which is quite a bit less. Whoops. Quite a bit less than what we see here, but still pretty good. So the total damage came out to be about 11k, and this is the sum of both Da Vinci and U81. And since U81 is in the top slot, it would make sense that she's doing a little bit less flooding because she's hitting fewer torps, but it's still very significant, and it's best to put her in this slot. And also, as you can see, Da Vinci, even after adjusting for Oath, still deals more damage than U37. Next up is the typical best U fleet that people recommend. And the total damage was lower, but the flood damage was a lot higher because of the extra torp stat that U81 gets from having another Wolfpack in the fleet. And also she gets a good position, so she lands more torps. We can isolate her flood damage since she's the only one with flood, and we can see that her actual damage with the flood, even without the Hunter mod, is the highest out of all of the subs, even higher than Da Vinci. But as you can see, U37 didn't really get as much of a boost from U96, and it's definitely not because of the lack of sample sizes. Like at 50 samples, pretty much anything you add will barely change the average, so this should be rather accurate. And since U37's reload isn't affected by having other Wolfpack subs in the fleet, this is probably due to the ship's AI being affected somehow by the specific composition of your fleet. I really have no other explanation for it, so the total damage is slightly lower, but not by too much. Okay, moving on to the next one. I replaced U81 with U47. This fleet, I knew it wasn't going to be that good, but for some reason the first 10 trials, U37 and U47 both way overperformed, resulting in a 136k average, but after 50 trials it went way down to 123k, which is worse than the fleet with U81 of course. But this time, U37 actually did a lot more damage, as you would expect her to, since she's buffed by U96, which further supports my theory that the specific comp of your fleet might have some effect on their AI, but who knows. And then, hold on, let me check. 91k, 92k. Oh, U37 actually did a bit more here. I didn't notice that. But definitely not here or here. Anyway, this was the last fleet that I tested, which is Wolfpack without U96, which is kind of blasphemous if you just say this without any testing, because U96 kind of seems like the glue that holds the U fleet together, but since her buff doesn't do as much as I thought it would be worth testing, and as you can see, U37 did 48k, whereas over here, even with U96, she only did 46k, so yeah, can't really tell what U96 actually contributes, even after 50 runs here, 50 runs here. So it's kind of sad. But as you can see, the total damage, 127, or the total average, 127k, which is actually higher than having U96, but no U81. So the conclusion basically is U81 deals the most, and you always want to run U37 because you have a good position in the middle, and she's the best between 37 and 47. And then in the last slot, you can run one of these two. So the best will be 37, 96, 81, and second best will be replacing actually 96 with 47. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Since I already summarized my findings earlier, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.